and maybe even for you in your life. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. You know what I'm saying? There's just a song that says what you need to hear. Or maybe there's this song that says what you want to say. You know? How many of you would say that? Man, you know, there's just... Yeah, me too. For me, there's many of both. There's many of both of those things. As I've said, my life begins and will probably end with music in very many ways. As movies have a soundtrack, there's a soundtrack to my life. And I'm sure that all of you, especially as you get older and look back on your life, will be able to say the same thing. Now, when we were in our last session together, how many of you were here yesterday? For the first session? If you were here yesterday or in our last session, you remember that my daddy was led to the base of the stairway to heaven. You remember? And was saved and miraculously healed. You remember that? I want you to know something. When I saw my dad fall down on his knees and ask Jesus Christ into his heart after the terrifying things that we'd seen up until that point, you remember the story? Climbing into the house, climbing into the attic, taking off the outlet walls to try to find out where the voices in his head were coming from. Come to find out there was a demonic and an angelic battle over his soul. And my father met that little preacher, the preacher coming to the house. He fell on his side. I'm looking, hey, before he hit his knee, you remember what he said? He was saved. Daddy was saved. Look here, I've seen miracles. I'm going to tell you about them all over the next 5 days. But that's the most profound and the first really sincere memory I have in my life as a 3-year-old boy sitting down with my daddy and telling him he had to quit drinking. Scared to death. And then he did. And you know how he did? He did because he asked Christ into his heart and life. He was healed from the DTs, from the voices, from the demons, like that. And just in case you say, oh, well, that old man's crazy, I don't believe him. I have my mother speak to you as well. You remember my mother? Little bitty lady. What did she say? She said it was true, didn't she? Let me tell you what it has as an effect on a 4-year-old boy that saw these miraculous interventions on behalf of God and through Jesus Christ. Look here. I saw my daddy get healed and get saved. You know what? I couldn't wait to get saved. Huh? Honey, I started walking the aisle at 5. Put me in the water, preacher. Walk that aisle every week. Look here. If that did that for my daddy, I want a whole lot of that, right? Couldn't wait to get saved. Walk the aisle every week. And finally, when I was about 7, Pastor Selby put me through the questions and the quizzings and made sure that I understood exactly what I was doing and why I was doing it. And I was baptized that summer that I told you about. That I ran through the back glass door because I heard Elvis was dead. I was baptized into the church that same summer. I've been a Christian for several years before then. But I'm glad they were safe. They didn't put me in the water until they knew it was the real thing. That's the beginning of my story. Now, I was saved in that same Baptist church where my daddy was saved, just like I told you yesterday. Now, in time, like my mother told you, my whole family, and their families accepted Christ because my daddy got saved and believed in Jesus. Fellas, you can read in between the lines all you want to. When men come to Christ, things happen. It happens in the homes, it happens in the schools, it happens in the workplace, it happens everywhere. And angels have been going up and down that stairway to heaven for my family. As these sessions continue, you will see more and more what I hope you already have begun to see. My story in many ways begins and ends with music. I've told you that. And it's like there's a soundtrack to my life, and my goal is to tell you that story in that soundtrack session. So today we'll pick back up with that. We'll pick back up with my story. Through the Led Zeppelin song, Stairway to Heaven, I was a singer in a rock and roll band at 13. I wish I could tell you that everyone in my life was as excited as I was about me being a rock and roll band. But look at here. It wasn't like that at all. There wasn't a whole lot of excitement with some of the folks in my life. I would become the victim of legalism at a very, very early age. Now, some of the students may seem a little bit wordy, and I'm saying this on behalf of the leaders here, the adults here, and the students, but I want you to understand something. As you get to know me, you'll understand why I hate legalism more than anything in the world. I believe Jesus hated it. I was 13 when I joined the band when we talked about it. Now, sadly enough, I was too immature at that age to handle the battles that would come. How many of you know what legalism is? Okay. I'll give you a very, very booky definition, and then I'll tell you in my words kind of what it means. Legalism is the error of demanding unqualified obedience to biblical interpretations and traditions in a higher regard than God's grace. One of the most likely forms of legalism you'll ever experience in your whole life is in the treatment of music. You will find that as you get older. You can find it today on any corner in America. You will hear about more feuds in churches over the style of worship music than you will hear about anything else. In fact, it's been described as what? Worship wars. Worship wars. Between the time I was about 9 and the time I was 13, I went to 10 schools and 10 different churches. You with me? That's a whole lot of moving, right? All these churches had one thing in common. They all did. They were very legalistic. They were very, very fundamental. And among the things they were the most legalistic about was music. Music was very misunderstood in the churches where I was raised. The only forms of music that had a beat, which if you're a musician is extraordinarily funny because every music has a beat. But the only kind of music accepted that had a beat in it was Southern Gospel. Now, how many of you love Southern Gospel? All right, earmuffs, just for a second. Coincidentally, to this day, I absolutely hate Southern Gospel music. Now, I know I'm wrong in that. I've had to strap my guitar on and do it too for the sake of the gospel. I'm not above it, but I don't appreciate it. And if you were me, let me tell you a little bit of newsflash, you wouldn't appreciate it either. But we'll talk more about that later. But how many of you ever heard the statement that says, guns don't kill people, people kill people? How many of you agree with that? Guns don't kill people, people kill people. Good. I hope you do, because that's what I like to call good old-fashioned. I mean, you don't blame the gun, right, for the murderer that used it. You with me? Now let's connect the dots a little bit. Do you, let's say, blame the car for the drunk driver? No. The car in and of itself is not evil, is it? Do you blame the animal, plant, or substance for the thing that's made from it? Whether it's a poppy or whether it's marijuana or whatever, I mean, do you blame the plant for what people do with it? Well, no, that would be totally dumb. Well, look, please, if you're within the sound of my voice tonight, hear me on this. I'm not here to tell you what kind of music to listen to. I'm not here to tell you what kind not to listen to. But I want you to take this away from here tonight, especially if you're grown. Look, there is no type of music that's inherently bad in and of itself.